We called her Piggy Preggers. I've never been a saint, but I have been a terrible sinner. I'm not looking for sympathy, because I deserve none. What I deserve may come for me still. I'm writing this because I owe a debt, and no matter what happens to me, that debt has to be paid. I'm sorry, Peggy. I'm killing Quiet Casey tonight. Her name was Peggy. Easily the ugliest girl in the school, if not the entire town of Oak Grove. She was a bookworm with Coke bottle glasses and a haircut straight out of 1985. She also had a terrible stutter. All of us were horrible to her since her family moved to town in 3rd grade. Hannah Stone, my best friend, was the first one to single Peggy out when she was the new kid. She started calling her Piggy. Everyone else just jumped in from there. No one ever really wanted anything to do with her, except to make her life hell. I have my share of that. I have to own it. In 5th grade, Simon Lucas was the new kid who had just moved to our town 2 weeks before school started. Peggy was the first person he talked to. He moved in next door to her, and he hung out with her for that first 2 weeks. Peggy had finally found a friend. I remember seeing them laughing and riding their bikes together over and over down the big hill on Dawson Street. The first day of school, he even sat with her at lunch, but by the end of the day, Simon realized that he was becoming friends with an outcast, the kiss of death for any new kid. Simon never said a word to her after that day. Peggy was alone again. When Peggy turned 16, her parents scraped up enough money to buy her a little beater that smoked and rattled down the road. You could literally hear it coming from a mile away. Peggy was so proud of that car. The innards may have been shot, but she kept it immaculate on the outside. There was never a bug in the grill or dirt in her wheels. She would even wipe it down during lunch break with one of those weird cloth things you could buy off of the television. Hannah decided it would be funny to play a prank, so one night, she stole the car right out of Peggy's driveway. The next morning a smoldering husk of what used to be Peggy's car was found in the school parking lot. No one was blamed for it, and no one was going to be. The town was just as guilty as the school for its disdain of Peggy. I know exactly who did it. There were 10 of us, and after we had dumped gasoline all over it, Hannah and I both threw a match. I didn't own it then, but I do now. The next day, Peggy confronted Hannah in front of the school. At first, we all assumed that there was going to be a fight. Instead, Peggy burst into tears and just asked, "Why? I don't even know what you're talking about, Piggy." "I know it was you." PPA, prove it. "Why do you care anyway? That car was an old piece of shit. My parents saved for FFF, 4 years to buy that FFF. For me." There was an awkward silence. That's when I first started to wake up. That's when I first started to realize that I had an ugly heart. Hannah started laughing. "It took your parents 4 years and that's all they could afford? God, you're way more poor than I thought." Everyone laughed. Everyone but me and Simon Lucas. We didn't laugh, but we also didn't do anything when Peggy ran away crying. Peggy went back to riding her bike around town, but 2 months later someone stole that too. It was senior year when Peggy got pregnant. She never said who the father was, but we all knew that it was Cody Baldwin. She had a crush on Cody for years, and even though he ignored her, he never really picked on her. I guess that's what made him attractive to her. She was in the right place at the right time, and she finally told him how she felt, and they went to bed together. It meant something to her. He was drunk and she was there. That's what it meant to him. He told her as much when she told him she was pregnant. Even though we knew who the father was, for some reason that didn't stop Hannah from starting the rumor that it was her father who knocked her up. Everyone in school picked it up and ran with it. Everyone started to call her Piggy Preggers. She could have gone on home studies, but for some reason, she insisted on finishing the year at school with everybody else. Hannah even started rumors that her baby was going to be some kind of mutated monster because of incest. A hideous thing that would haunt the town. Someone drew a crude picture on Peggy's locker of the monster baby with 2 clawed arms and no legs. I look back on it now, and I have no excuse for myself. I was a cruel shadow of a human being who enjoyed hurting someone. I have to own that. What I am amazed by is that by that time, the whole town of Oak Grove seemed to hate her for no particular reason, and she knew it. The town othered her, and they all loved to do it. Maybe that's why she stayed in school. Maybe she never truly let anyone get to her, until the bad day happened. The day before spring break, I tried to apologize to Peggy at school just after first period. She smiled back at me. You feel bad, huh? Little quiet CCCC. Casey. Well, maybe if you feel bad you'd SSS. Stand up and SSS. Say something next time your little FFF. Friends gang up on me. Only an hour later, I saw a group of my friends walking behind Peggy through the hallway of the second floor. Hannah seemed to have it in for Peggy more than she usually did, and she was trying everything to get under Peggy's skin. She had made a catchy little earworm that she repeated over and over whenever Peggy was within earshot. PPP. Piggy Preggers with her legs up high. Her daddy put it in and let the BBB. Baby batter fly. Hannah repeated it 4 times while she walked behind her, and when Peggy finally got to the edge of the stairs, she turned toward Hannah with a pointed finger. Hannah, you need to. Don't point your finger at me, Piggy. It happened so fast. To this day, I don't know if Hannah meant to push her or it was just an accident. What I do know is that 5 seconds later, Peggy was face down on the floor at the bottom of the stairs with blood spilling out of her head, and somehow, when we were asked what happened, none of us knew. Quiet Casey. She was rushed to the hospital. I still remember everyone standing outside of the school when she was loaded in the back of the ambulance. Cody Baldwin watched her go in silence, and as the ambulance pulled away, several of us looked over at him. She was carrying his baby after all. I asked him if he was all right. He jerked around to the sound of my voice like I broke him out of a trance. Oh, yeah, it's just weird, that's all. I always thought she was going to come after me for child support someday. I think I might have just dodged a bullet. She was in a coma for 7 months. I moved away to go to college, but Hannah kept me in the loop. She told me that she heard when Peggy finally woke up, the only thing she asked about was her baby. They told her the baby died the day she fell down the stairs. Peggy never said another word. According to town legend, her eyes glazed over into a 1,000-yard stare that never broke and her mouth upturned to a slight smile. She stayed that way until they finally gave up on her and transferred her to a mental hospital about an hour outside of town. I listened to Hannah telling me the story, and there were those little noises and intonations that let me know that she was smiling on the other end while she was talking. After she was done, I was silent. Why was I ever friends with this person? Why had I been so cruel to someone for no reason? Casey? Are you still there? Yeah. Can I ask you a question? Okay. Is it wrong that I don't feel bad? Casey, hello? I had no words for her. I hung up the phone. I ran to the bathroom and threw up all over the floor before I could make it to the toilet. I needed to change who I was. Years went by. My parents stayed in Oak Grove, but I wouldn't go back to visit them. Instead, I would ask them to come stay with me. Every time they brought up my old hometown, I was quick to change the subject. One day I finally got up the courage to tell my parents what exactly happened to Peggy and my part in everything. To my surprise, they shrugged it off. They told me not to worry. Bad things happen, honey. As the years went on, I talked to them less and less. I noticed that my parents seemed to change for the worse. They were more bitter, easier to anger, and more apathetic towards people in general. 12 years after I left my hometown, my parents were involved in a car accident, and I lost them both. I had no choice but to go back home to settle all of their affairs. As I drove into Oak Grove, I noticed the state of the town. Everything was run down. Trash everywhere, boarded up businesses, stray dogs whose stomachs were rubbing their backbones. Even the lake where we all used to hang out was little more than a fetid pond that reeked of dead fish. The people I saw walking around town moved in an aimless way, and all the American flags from every porch were ragged and threadbare. The church had burned down a few years before, and the rubble had never been cleared. Most of the oaks that lined the streets were dead or dying. When I finally pulled into the driveway of my old house, I barely recognized it. My parents had always taken care of their home when I was growing up. I had only been gone for 12 years, but it looked like it had aged more than 30 or 40 without the slightest effort of upkeep. When I went inside, I was met with the home of people who had never thrown anything away. Piles and piles of garbage and newspapers and food wrappers and all kinds of junk. My parents had been living like animals, and I had no idea. I tried my best to clean up a little, but it was a lost cause. I heard a knock at the door. I never should have opened it. Casey? Hannah looked far older than she should. Deep lines were set in her brow, and there were streaks of gray in her dark hair. She was also very pregnant. Casey! Oh my God! Hi! She hugged me as tightly as she could manage with her stomach between us. Hi! I didn't know you were in town. I'm so sorry about your parents. Thank you. There was a long silence, and I realized that I had the perfect excuse for not inviting her in. I opened the door so she could see the state of my old house. I'd invite you in, but it's a little crowded in here. Oh, I understand. You come by my place. Have you got a minute? I don't know if I can. I've got a lot of stuff to do here. Oh, come on. Just for a little bit. Let's catch up. Her house was worse than my parents', although she didn't seem to notice. The outside was a monument to outrageous neglect, and the stairs that led up to her front door were cracked and covered in a thick brown mold. Inside was almost an obstacle course of refuse and debris. More trash, more smells, and small smatterings of mouse everywhere. I didn't want to sit down. She had lost both of her parents as well just 2 years after high school. She never said what happened, and I didn't ask. The more she talked, the more I realized how much I hadn't missed her. It sounds strange, but I felt this pull inside my brain. Something was trying to make my mind slip back into the old me, and I was afraid of it. It was like being back in my hometown was bringing out the parts of me that I hated somehow. An angry thing that wanted me to grow ugly the way it had. She offered me a drink and I accepted. I needed it. I was surprised and disgusted that she poured one for herself. She sat down, handed me my whiskey and Coke, and then sucked down half of hers. Are you sure you should be drinking? Oh hell, it's the only thing that quiets this little bastard down. I think he looks forward to it every night. I'm just starting early today. She was repellent. I wanted to leave, but what she said next made me stay. Sometimes. I think we broke this town, you know? Like Piggy took this town down the tubes with her. Remember Piggy? That's kind of hard to forget. God, what a Is she still up at that hospital? As far as anyone knows, she's still blowing spit bubbles and shitting her pants in a bed up there. Hasn't kept her from cursing this town, though. Cursing? Casey, look at it. Everything has just been falling apart for the last 12 years. So many people have moved away, but the ones who still live here are either sick or dying. She laughed so hard, she jostled something loose in her throat. She snorted and then spat out a green glob on the cover of an old people magazine. Did you hear what happened to Cody Baldwin?